The first thing I remember is the buzz, not the kind you notice right away. It was underneath everything, this low hum from the light above the table that nobody else seemed to hear. I kept thinking someone was going to change it out or call maintenance, but nobody ever did. It was just there, this constant electric sound, like the room itself was nervous. I'm telling you this because that buzz is the first thing that comes back every time I think about that day. And I'm telling you this story because a friend asked me in the car last week what it was actually like in there, and I realized I'd never actually said it out loud. Not the way it happened, not the part that mattered. I've been sitting in this parking lot for 20 minutes. The engine is off, but the radio is still playing, something quiet, something I wasn't really listening to. My friend is in the passenger seat with a coffee that went cold about 10 minutes ago, and I keep looking at the building across the street where everything happened. The lights are on. There's a cleaning crew inside. I can see them moving past the windows on the second floor. Same building, different day. And I keep thinking about all the things I never said, all the moments I just let pass, and my friend said, "What was it actually like in there?" And I didn't know how to answer because the answer is not the answer anyone expects. I'm the one who was running the teleprompter. I was in the booth with the screens, the ones that show the words to whoever's standing at that long table. You know the setup. You've seen it 100 times on TV. But you only see what's aimed at the cameras. You don't see what I saw. You don't see the room from above, the way the light falls across the table, the way the people below look like pieces on a board if you know where to stand. And I knew where to stand. That was my job. That was the only thing I was good at in that building, in that world. I knew where to stand, and I knew what to push on the screen, and I knew when to click the button that moved the words forward, and I knew when to stay quiet. That's what I was, not a hero, not a witness. Just a person who pushed buttons and watched and stayed quiet. And this is the story of what I saw when I stayed quiet. Let me get you into the room first. Because if I don't set it up right, none of the rest of it makes sense. And I've been carrying this for a long time, and I want you to understand it the way I understood it, from the inside, from the place where I was standing when it all happened. The hearing room was smaller than it looked on television. That's always the case, right? Everything on TV looks bigger, cleaner, more important. But in person, the walls were close, the ceiling was low, and there was a stain on the carpet near the left chair that looked like someone had spilled coffee there once, and nobody had gotten around to cleaning it. I noticed that stain because I looked at it a lot. When I was up in the booth, when I was waiting for the next cue, when I needed something to focus on that wasn't the faces below, I looked at that stain, and I thought about how weird it was that something so ordinary was sitting right there in the middle of all that importance. The table was long, but not that long. 8 people could sit around it comfortably, 9 if you squeezed. There was a wood grain pattern on the surface, this repeating swirl that I kept tracing with my eyes when things got slow. It was the kind of table that had been in 100 rooms like this, the kind of table that had seen 1,000 arguments and 1,000 silences and would see 1,000 more after we were all gone. It wasn't special. It was just furniture. But it was the center of everything that day. There were 2 microphones on stands, one for each side. The one on the left had a small piece of tape on the stem that was starting to curl up. I remember that because I thought about peeling it off before we went live, but I wasn't supposed to touch anything in front of the table. I was behind the glass in the booth. My job was the words on the screen, nothing else. Don't touch the equipment. Don't touch the furniture. Don't touch anything. Just push the buttons and watch and stay out of the way. The chairs had been switched the night before. I know this because the stage crew was in there until almost midnight, and when I came in that morning, one of the chairs that had been on the left side was now on the right. Just swapped. No reason given. I didn't think anything of it at the time. You learn not to ask why about things like that. You learn that the people who move the chairs have reasons, and those reasons are not your business, and if you ask questions, you just make trouble for yourself. So I didn't ask, I just noticed. I noticed the chair had moved, and I filed it away, and I moved on to the next thing on my list. The press section was to my right, behind a low railing. There were maybe 15 reporters, some with cameras, some with just notebooks. They were louder than I expected. The room was supposed to be quiet, but there was this constant low murmur, this shifting of weight, these whispered conversations that never quite stopped. When you watch at home, you think it's this silent, tense room where everyone is holding their breath. It wasn't. It was full of people trying not to be noticed, and that noise of trying not to be noticed is louder than silence. It's all those small sounds, those coughs, those chair legs scraping, those papers rustling that build up into this wall of noise that you stop hearing after a while but is still there, still filling the room. And there was a pitcher of water on the table, A glass one with actual water in it and two glasses set to the left and right of where the two main seats were. I don't know who brought that in. It was just there when I arrived. One of those details that means nothing until it means everything. I didn't think about that picture again until later, until after. Until I was sitting in my car in this same parking lot, and I realized that I had seen something happen with that picture that nobody else had seen, and that it mattered, and that I had to decide whether to carry it or to let it go. This is where I have to tell you about the thing with the door. The door at the back of the room was supposed to be locked. I didn't know this at the time. I found out later. But there was a moment, maybe 10 minutes before we were supposed to start, when someone from security came through that door and said something to one of the junior aides. The aide went pale. I mean actually pale, the way a person goes when they hear something they weren't expecting. I was watching from the booth, and I saw the color leave her face, and I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it was something. And the aide went to the other aide, and they both went to the back door, and I heard one of them say, "It was supposed to be locked." I don't know what that meant. I still don't know what that meant. But I remember that door, and I remember that conversation, and I remember thinking, as I watched the room fill up, that there was something underneath the surface of that day that I wasn't seeing yet. Nobody was. That was the feeling I had. Something was moving under the water, and all of us were watching the surface, and none of us knew what was underneath. At the time, I thought it was nothing. Some security issue, some protocol that got missed, some small mistake that would be fixed and forgotten. But it stuck with me. It stuck because of the way that aide looked. It stuck because of the way they both moved toward that door like they were going to fix something that shouldn't have been broken. And I filed it away, this thing I didn't understand, and I kept watching, and I kept pushing the buttons, and I waited for the moment when it would all make sense. I'm going to come back to that door. I'm going to come back to what I learned about it later. But not yet. Because there are other things I need to tell you first, other things I saw that were happening at the same time, other details that were piling up in my mind, even though I didn't know what they meant yet. She came in from the left. That's how you say it, right? She came in from the left side of the frame, Jasmine Crockett. She walked in and said something to her aide, something quiet, and the aide nodded, and she took her seat on the right side of the table. I was looking down from the booth, so I saw her from above, the top of her head, her shoulders, the way she sat down in that chair like she'd been sitting in it for hours, like she was never going to leave it. There was something about the way she moved that I've thought about a lot since. Not slow. Not fast, just deliberate. Every motion had a purpose, and none of the purposes were visible from where I was standing. She didn't look around. She didn't wave at anyone. She just sat there with her hands flat on the table, and she waited. That's the word I keep coming back to. Waited. She wasn't preparing. She wasn't reviewing notes. She wasn't talking to the people around her. She was just sitting there still, like she had already done everything she needed to do, and now she was just going to let time pass until the moment arrived. I remember thinking that was strange. I remember thinking that most people who come into a room like that, a room where something important is about to happen, they move around. They shuffle papers. They check their phones. They talk to the people next to them. They do something. But she just sat there. She was the most still person in the room, and she was the one who was about to have the most to say. The other one came in about 4 minutes later. He walked in from the side door, the one near the press section, and the cameras all turned, and the noise in the room got louder for a second and then quiet. Like someone had pressed mute. He shook a few hands on the way in. He said something to someone near the front row. He was smiling. He looked like a person who was comfortable being watched, like he'd been watched his whole life and had gotten used to it. He moved through the room like the room was his, like he owned the air in it, like every step he took was a claim on the space around him. He took his seat on the left side of the table. When he sat down, the chair made this sound, this scrape against the floor, and I remember thinking it was too loud for the room. It was the first thing he did that didn't look rehearsed. The scrape of that chair. The sound of wood against wood, the sound of a body taking its place, the sound of someone arriving and claiming the spot that had been prepared for them. And this is the first thing I want to tell you that the cameras missed. There was a swallow. I saw it from where I was sitting. After the first question was asked, after Jasmine spoke and he was about to answer, he did this thing with his throat. A swallow, but it came too late. It came about a full second after the question ended, like his brain had to catch up with what was happening before his body could respond. Most people swallow right when they need to, right when the moment comes, right when they need to clear their throat to speak. His came after. Like he was thinking about swallowing instead of just swallowing. Like his body was waiting for instructions from a brain that was processing what had just been said. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I noticed it. And it was the first thing that told me something was happening underneath what we were all watching. He was not as calm as he looked. He was not as ready as he seemed. There was a gap, a tiny gap, between what was happening and how his body was responding to it, and I saw that gap because I was above the room and I was watching everything at once. There was a question she asked me on the way in. I want to go back to that because I didn't understand it at the time. I was standing outside the booth waiting for the go-ahead, and she walked past me on her way to the table. She didn't look up at me. She looked straight ahead. And she said, "Is the screen clean?" I said yes, the screen was clean. The words I was going to show her were the words from the prepared remarks. Nothing was going to be off script. I didn't know why she was asking. She just nodded and kept walking. It wasn't until later that I realized what she meant. Not the screen on my side, the screen on hers, the one she could see reflected in the glass of the booth or in the dark surface of the monitor that was angled toward her. She wasn't asking if my screen was clean. She was asking if the room was clean, if the words were ready, if everything was set. She was asking if there were any surprises waiting for her, any tricks, any last-minute changes that someone might have slipped in while she wasn't looking. But I didn't know that then. At the time, I thought it was a simple question about the teleprompter. I said yes, and that was it. She walked in and sat down, and I went back to my station, and I pushed the buttons, and I watched the words scroll up the screen, and I didn't think about that question again for a long time. I would find out later why that mattered. I would find out that she had been in rooms before where the screens were not clean, where the words that appeared were not the words that were supposed to be there, where someone had tried to put something over on her at the last second. And she had learned to ask. She had learned that the space between the booth and the table was a place where things could go wrong, and she had learned to make sure they didn't go wrong on her watch. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting ahead of where I need to be. Let me slow down. Let me go back to the room, back to the people, back to the details that I saw from up there in the booth while the cameras were rolling and the world was watching. The first hour was what everyone saw, questions and answers, back and forth, the usual rhythm of these things. I sat in the booth and pushed the buttons that moved the words up the screen one line at a time the way I always did. The way I was trained to do, click, click, click. The words scrolled and whoever was speaking read them and the cameras caught it, and that was the broadcast. That was what the people at home saw. That was what made it into the record. But I was watching something else. I was watching the foot. There was a moment about 40 minutes in when I saw it for the first time. His foot was tapping under the table. This slow, almost unconscious rhythm like he was keeping time to a song nobody else could hear. Tap, tap, tap. It was his left foot, and it was moving like he didn't even know it was doing it. The rest of his body was still, his face was composed, his voice was steady, but under the table his foot was tapping this steady beat like a metronome. And then it stopped. Not gradually, not slowing down. It just stopped all at once like someone had flipped a switch. His foot went completely still, and his whole body went still with it, and I looked up at his face and saw that he was looking at her, directly at her. She had just said something, and he had gone rigid. And this is the second tell I want you to know about. Because the cameras caught his face in that moment, and anyone watching at home would have seen a man listening, a man paying attention, a man who was engaged with what was being said. But I was above the room looking down at the whole picture, and I saw what was under the table. I saw the way his foot had stopped like it had hit a wall. I saw the way his whole body had tensed up when she spoke. He wasn't listening. He was bracing. Something had happened in what she said. Something had landed on him, and his body had reacted before his mind could catch up. She had said something that hit something. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't hear the words from the booth. I could only see the words on the screen, but I could see his body react, and his body was telling me something his face was hiding. He was not as in control as he wanted everyone to think. He was not as steady as he looked. There was a crack in the wall, and I was the only one who saw it because I was the only one looking at the whole room at once. I remember thinking in that moment, I see you. Not out loud, not to anyone, just in my own head. I saw the way his foot had stopped. I saw the way his body had tightened. I saw him trying to hold something together, and I knew that what I was seeing was not what the cameras were showing to the world. And I kept watching, and I kept pushing the buttons, and I didn't say anything to anyone because what would I have said? I saw his foot stop. That sounds crazy. That sounds like nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was a tell, it was a crack, and I saw it. I want you to stay with me here because this is the part I can still see clearly. This is the part that plays back in my head when I think about that day. The part I keep coming back to. The part I cannot let go of no matter how many times I try. There was a moment during the second hour, during what they called a break. The cameras were off. The microphones were live, but no one was speaking when he did something. He was sitting in his chair, and he leaned over to his aide, the one standing just behind his left shoulder, and he said something into the aide's ear. I couldn't hear what it was. The microphones didn't pick it up, or if they did, it was buried under the noise of the room, the shuffle of people moving, the low murmur of conversations that never stopped. But I saw his lips move, and I saw the aide's face change, and I saw the aide nod once and then step back. Whatever he said, it mattered to the aide. And it mattered enough that the aide reacted, and then the aide moved away, and I remember thinking at the time that I should remember that I should hold on to it because it felt important. It felt like the kind of moment that would matter later, even though I didn't know why yet. It felt like a signal, like something being passed from one person to another, a message that had meaning even though I couldn't decode it. I didn't know what it was about. I still don't know for sure, but I think he was changing something. I think something in that room wasn't going the way he expected, and he was trying to adjust. He was sending a message to someone, and the message was not about what was being said. The message was about what was about to happen. He was preparing for something, or he was warning someone, or he was changing a plan that had already been set in motion. Whatever it was important enough that he leaned across the space between his chair and the aide's ear, and whispered something that nobody else was supposed to hear. The cameras missed it. The cameras were aimed at the table, not at the space behind it. The aide stepped back and the moment was gone, and if you were watching at home, you never saw a thing. You saw a man sitting in a chair during a break, and you saw an aide standing behind him, and you saw nothing unusual, nothing worth remembering. But I saw it. From up there, from my booth, I saw it. And I've been thinking about it ever since. I need to tell you about the paper. There was a piece of paper on the table. It was there when they both sat down. I remember noticing it because it was folded in half, and it was sitting on the left side of the table, near where he would be sitting. It was plain, white, unremarkable. I thought it was just a copy of his prepared remarks, something he'd brought with him, something normal. The kind of thing that sits on a table in a room like this all the time. The kind of thing nobody noti. CES. But he never picked it up. The whole time he was in that room, every time he looked like he was about to reach for it, something happened. A question was asked. A point was made. His hand would start to move, and then it would stop, and he would leave the paper right where it was. I counted every time his hand went toward that paper. It happened at least 6 times. 6 times he almost reached for it. 6 times he didn't. Each time I watched his hand move, and each time something interrupted, and each time he pulled his hand back and left the paper untouched. And each time I thought, why doesn't he just look at it? It was right there. It was right in front of him. Why not just pick it up and use it like anyone would? But he didn't. He never did. And now, thinking back on it, I think I understand why. I think the paper was something he was supposed to use, and when the moment came, he decided not to. He looked at it and he chose silence. He chose to sit there without it, and that was his way of admitting something to himself even if he wasn't admitting it to anyone else. He didn't need the paper, or he didn't want to need it. Or he looked at it and decided that whatever was on it wasn't going to help him in that room, in that moment, with her sitting across from him doing the thing she was doing. I would find out later what might have been on that paper, but I'll get to that. That's one of the things I'm still holding on to, still turning over in my mind, still trying to understand. But not yet. First, I need to tell you about the smile. The third tell is the smile. It happened toward the end of the 3rd hour. They were going back and forth about something. I can't remember what anymore, the specifics have blurred. It was something about process, something about procedure, and she said something sharp, something that landed, and the room went quiet for a second. And his response was a smile. But it came wrong. The smile came about 2 seconds after it should have. Like he was deciding to smile, like he was choosing to show that he wasn't bothered, like he was putting on a mask. It wasn't a natural reaction. It was a performance of a reaction. Like he had been told once that smiling under pressure makes you look strong, and he was trying to do that. He was trying to follow the instruction, but the timing was off, and everyone who was really watching could see that it was off. And this is the thing about that smile that I cannot stop thinking about. His eyes didn't match it. The smile was on his mouth, but not in the rest of his face. His eyes were still hard. His forehead was still tight. The muscles around his eyes were still tense. It was like his face was in 2 different places at the same time, the top half of his face saying one thing and the bottom half saying something else, and anyone who was looking closely could see the disconnect. I remember thinking in that moment that I was watching a person try to hold something together. He was smiling because he thought he needed to smile, because someone had told him once that smiling under pressure makes you look strong. But he was doing it wrong. or he was doing it at the wrong time, or he was doing it for the wrong reasons, and the smile just looked like a crack in the wall. It looked like the moment when something inside him was starting to come apart, and he was trying to use his face to hold it together. She didn't smile back, she just looked at him. She looked at him the way a person looks at something they've already figured out, like she had solved the puzzle and now she was just waiting for the other person to catch up. She didn't rush, she didn't push, she just waited. And in that waiting, she won something, not the argument, not the point, something else, something quieter. The moment when he had to admit to himself, in front of her, in front of me, in front of anyone who was really watching, that he didn't have what he thought he had. The cameras didn't catch it. The cameras caught a man smiling and a woman looking at him and a room full of people watching them. The broadcast went on. The microphones picked up the next question and the next answer, and nothing in the official record shows that 2 seconds ever happened, that moment when his smile came and his eyes didn't follow, that moment when the mask slipped for just a second before he put it back on. But I saw it. From up there, from my booth, I saw the whole picture. I saw the disconnect. I saw the crack. And I knew in that moment that something had shifted. I didn't know what it was yet. I didn't know what it meant. But I knew that the room felt different after that smile, that something had changed in the energy, and I kept watching and I kept waiting and I kept pushing the buttons, and I let the moment pass without saying anything to anyone because what would I have said? I saw his smile come too late. That sounds like nothing. That sounds like I'm reading too much into a moment. But it wasn't nothing. It was a tell. It was the third tell, the last one, the one that confirmed what the other two had already told me. He was not what he seemed to be. He was not as strong as he looked. He was holding something together, and I was the only one who could see that because I was the only one looking at everything at once. I'm going to tell you now the thing I've never said out loud before. I've been carrying this for a long time. I told you that at the beginning. I told you I was sitting in this car with a friend who asked me what it was actually like in there. And I said I would tell you, and I have been telling you, but I haven't told you the part that matters yet. I haven't told you the part that I keep turning over in my mind, the part that wakes me up at night, the part that I cannot let go of no matter how many times I try. There was a moment during what would become the last 15 minutes when the cameras were still rolling and everyone in the room thought they knew what was happening. The broadcast was live, the microphones were hot, and both of them were sitting at that table saying the things that people were going to watch and analyze and argue about for weeks. It looked like a normal exchange. It looked like what these things always look like. Two people disagreeing, going back and forth, doing the thing they were supposed to do. But in that moment, something else was happening, something only I could see. She asked him a question, not one of the questions on the screen, not one of the prepared remarks. She asked him a question off mic in the middle of something else, so quiet that the microphones didn't catch it, so fast that the cameras didn't catch her lips moving. She asked him a question, and I saw his face when he heard it, and I saw the way his body reacted, and I knew right then that he didn't have an answer. He blinked, he looked at her. He opened his mouth and then closed it again, and for about 2 full seconds the room was completely still, and I watched a man who had walked into that room thinking he was in control realize that he was not. He was not in control. He was sitting in that chair with his hands on the table and his mouth open and nothing coming out, and she was looking at him, and the room was waiting, and nobody knew what was happening except me. Nobody knew what she had just done except me. She didn't repeat the question, she didn't push, she didn't make him answer, she just waited. And in that waiting, she won something, not the argument, not the point, something else, something quieter. The moment when he had to admit to himself, in front of her, in front of me, in front of anyone who was really watching, that he didn't have what he thought he had. That he had come into that room thinking he was going to win something, and she had already taken it from him, and she had done it so quietly that nobody else noticed. The cameras didn't catch it. The broadcast went on. The microphones picked up the next question and the next answer, and nothing in the official record shows that 2 seconds ever happened. If you watch the footage at home, you see two people going back and forth, you see a normal hearing, you see nothing unusual, but I was there. I was in the booth. I was watching everything at once, and I saw what happened in that 2-second gap. I saw him realize he was lost. I saw her know that he was lost. I saw the whole thing happen right in front of me, and nobody else saw it because nobody else was looking at the whole picture the way I was. And I said nothing. I just kept pushing the buttons on my screen, and I watched them wrap up, and I watched them leave the room, and I went home that night, and I ate dinner, and I went to bed, and I never told anyone until right now, sitting in this car on this drive home, with you in the passenger seat asking me what it was actually like in there. I knew the moment it happened. I knew what she had just done. I knew what she had just taken from him, and I kept it. I held on to it like it was a secret, like it was something I was protecting, something I was keeping safe. And I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't tell anyone. I don't know why I let it just sit there inside me for all this time. But I did. And now I'm telling you. The water pitcher is the other thing I keep coming back to. After it was over, after the cameras were off and the room was empty, I came down from the booth. I walked out onto the floor and I looked at the table and the pitcher was still there. The two glasses were still there. And there was a piece of paper on the left side of the table, the same piece of paper that had been there the whole time, folded in half, untouched. I don't know what was on it. I never found out. But I think it was something he was supposed to use, and he chose not to, and that choice told me something about what he thought was going to happen in that room. Maybe he didn't need it. Maybe he didn't want it. Maybe he looked at it and decided it was better not to touch it, better to leave it there as proof that he had options he wasn't going to use. But I think it was something else. I think it was something he was supposed to have ready, and when the moment came, he decided not to use it. He looked at it and he chose silence. He chose to sit there without it, and that was his way of admitting something to himself, even if he wasn't admitting it to anyone else. I walked past that table. I saw that paper. I picked it up for a second and put it back down. I don't know why I did that. It wasn't mine to touch. But I wanted to know what was on it, and I never found out, and I think about that sometimes, this idea that there was something in that room that I could have understood and didn't, and maybe it would have changed how I saw the whole thing. But maybe not. Maybe the paper was nothing. Maybe it was just a piece of paper that meant nothing and I gave it meaning, because I was looking for meaning in everything that day. And then there was the glass. This is the part I haven't told you yet. This is the part that I keep turning over in my mind, the part that I cannot let go of no matter how many times I try. When they were done, when the cameras were off and the aides were packing up and the reporters were putting away their notebooks, I watched her walk out. She walked past the table, past the pitcher, past the two glasses, and she didn't look at any of it. She just walked toward the door. One step, another step, another step. Just walking, just leaving. No hesitation, no looking back, no nothing. Just walking out of the room like she had done what she came to do, and now she was done. And then she stopped. She turned around. She looked back at the room, at the table, at the empty chairs. And she did something I will never forget, something I have replayed in my mind 1,000 times, something I have tried to explain to myself in 100 different ways and still cannot quite understand. She picked up one of the glasses from the table. Not the one from her side, the one from his side, the glass that was sitting on the left side of the table, the side where he had been sitting, the side with the paper that he never touched. She reached across the table and she picked it up, this glass full of water, and she looked at the water inside it. She just looked at it for a second, like she was seeing something in it, like she was thinking about something. And then she set it back down. She set it back down right where it was without drinking from it. She set it down like she had won something. Like she was showing me, not you, not the cameras, me, that she didn't need what was in that glass, that she had already gotten what she came for, that the water wasn't the point. The gesture was the point. The fact that she had picked it up and looked at it and set it back down, all while he was probably already in the hallway, probably already on his way out, probably already thinking about something else. She set it down like she was closing a door, like she was putting an end to something, like she was saying without saying it out loud, I know what you were trying to do, and I know why you didn't do it, and it doesn't matter anymore because I already won. And then she left. I watched her leave. I stood there in that room, in that empty room that still smelled like people and tension and all the things that had happened in it, and I watched her walk out the door and disappear. And I didn't move. I didn't follow her. I didn't say anything to her or to anyone else. I just stood there, holding the remote control for the teleprompter, holding the clipboard with my notes on it, holding all the small pieces of who I was in that room, and I let her go. The next thing I remember is the buzz. That same electric hum from the light above the table. The one nobody else seemed to hear. It was still there, this constant low sound, and I was still standing in that room, and the room was empty now, and the only thing left was that sound and me and the pitcher and the two glasses and the piece of paper that nobody ever picked up. I stood there for a long time. I don't know how long. Long enough that the cleaning crew started to look at me like I was strange, like I was someone who didn't know when to leave. Long enough that the light above the table started to feel like it was the only thing keeping the room from going completely dark. Long enough that I started to think about what I had just seen, and what it meant, and why I couldn't stop thinking about the way she picked up that glass and set it back down. And I made a choice. I made a choice to keep it, to hold on to it, to not tell anyone. I don't know why. Maybe I thought nobody would believe me. Maybe I thought it wasn't that important, just a moment, just a detail, just the kind of thing that happens in a room that nobody notices except the person who was there. But it was important to me. It was important because it told me something about what had happened in that room, something that I hadn't understood until I saw her pick up that glass. She had won something, not the argument, not the point. The room. She had won the room. She had walked in and sat down and waited and watched and asked her questions and got her answers, and at the end, when everyone thought it was over, she had reached across and picked up his glass and looked at it and set it back down and walked out. That was the win. That was the thing that nobody saw. That was the thing I have been carrying ever since. You want to know the truth? I almost stopped this story here. I almost didn't tell you the rest. I almost got in the car with my friend and talked about something else, something easier, something that doesn't make me feel the way this makes me feel. The part about the door, the part about the paper, the part about the question she asked me on the way in, I could have stopped there. I could have told you those things and left out the rest. I could have made it a shorter story, an easier story, a story that doesn't make me feel like I'm giving something away that I was supposed to keep. But the reason I'm telling you all of it is because of how it ended. Not the hearing, not the questions and answers, not the debate about procedure or process or whatever it was that they spent 3 hours going back and forth about. The ending. The part that nobody saw. The part that happened after the cameras stopped and the microphones went dead and everyone thought the story was over. That's the part that matters. That's the part I've been holding on to all this time. That's the part that made me finally decide to talk, finally decide to put all of this into words, finally decide to tell someone what I saw in that room when the cameras weren't watching and the world wasn't looking. She reached across and picked up his glass and looked at the water inside it and set it back down without drinking from it. That's the win. That's the moment. That's the thing that nobody will ever know about unless I tell them, and I'm telling you now, and I don't know what you're going to do with it, and I don't know if it changes anything, but I need you to know that I saw it. I saw what happened in that room when the cameras weren't watching, and I saw the way she won something that nobody on the broadcast will ever know about, and I kept it to myself for a long time, and I'm telling you now, sitting in this car on this drive home, because you asked me what it was actually like in there. And here's the confession. Here is the thing I have never told anyone until now. I was in that room, I saw what happened, I knew what it was. I knew the moment it happened, the moment she reached across and picked up that glass, the moment she looked at the water and set it back down, the moment she walked out and left it there as proof of what she had done. I knew, I saw it, I understood it, and I said nothing. I watched her win and I watched him not know that he'd lost, and I went home that night and I ate dinner and I went to bed and I never told anyone. Not that night. Not the next day, not the next week, not the next month, not when people were talking about the hearing, not when people were analyzing what was said and what it meant, not when people were arguing about who won and who lost. I heard all of it. I listened to all of it, and I never said a word. I knew something that nobody else knew. I knew what had really happened. I knew that the win was not in the questions and answers, not in the debate, not in whatever they spent 3 hours arguing about. The win was in that glass of water. The win was in the gesture she made after everyone thought it was over. The win was hers, and only I saw it, and I kept it, and I let everyone else go on thinking whatever they were thinking about who won that day. I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe I thought nobody would believe me. Maybe I thought it wasn't that important. Maybe I thought that if I said something, I would be making a claim that I couldn't prove, that I would be telling a story that nobody else could verify, that I would just be one more person with an opinion about what happened in a room full of people who had opinions about what happened. Maybe I thought that the truth didn't matter, that the official story was already written, and nothing I could say would change it. That my little piece of the picture was too small to matter in the larger picture everyone was already arguing about. Or maybe I was scared. Maybe I was scared of what would happen if I said something, of what it would mean to speak up, of what it would cost me to tell the truth when everyone else was telling a different story. I don't know. I still don't know. I've been king about it for a long time, and I still don't have an answer. But here's what I know. I know that I saw something. I know that I was the only one who saw it. I know that I had the chance to tell the truth and I didn't take it, and I've been living with that ever since. I've been carrying it. I've been holding it inside me like it was a stone, like it was something heavy that I couldn't put down, and every time someone talks about that day, every time someone brings up that hearing, every time someone asks me what I think about what happened, I feel it. I feel the weight of the thing I didn't say. I feel the weight of the truth I kept. And now I'm putting it down. Now I'm telling you. Now I'm saying out loud for the first time what I've been holding inside me for so long. She won in that room in a way that nobody else saw, and I knew it, and I said nothing. And I've been carrying that, and I'm tired of carrying it, and I want to put it down. So there it is, the whole thing, everything I saw, everything I held on to, everything I didn't say. I'm giving it to you now, and I don't know what you're going to do with it, and I don't know if it changes anything, but I needed you to know. I needed someone to know. I needed to finally, after all this time, tell the truth about what I saw in that room. I hope it was worth the wait.